All right. Get this shared out. We're about a minute to go here. About 11 riders in the feed zone today with us. We got a couple on Discord. Welcome everybody. Get this shared out, get everybody grouped up. Now we'll get the show on the road. So for those that are just tuning in, this is a live ride, as well as interactive talk here. Our conversation today is going to be pretty controversial, I would say. It's about athletes and the use of what's called a low-carb, high-fat diet. We've seen a lot of it in the media. We're going to try to break that down, kind of see if we could make some sense of it today. Thanks for joining in, everybody. About 30 seconds, ready to roll here. We'll get this shared out as we get going, and then show on the road. Quick message out to the riders. Here we go. We are rolling. Sweet spot here. There we go. Excellent. Okay. All right. Now let's get this over to the slides. Get this shared out as I do my intro here. Well, welcome everybody to In the Feed Zone. My name is Jason Flores, and I go by JFlow here on Lchf. So if you see me online, give me a ride on. I'll give you a ride on back. Quick medical disclaimer: that the only purpose of this live stream is to educate and to inform. There is no substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified professional. And that the live stream is provided on the understanding that it doesn't constitute medical or professional advice or services. Some of the goals of the live stream today are to present articles in the media covering food and hydration and how it relates to endurance sports, as well as opening a dialogue for viewers to ask questions, get advice, and talk about their experiences. All right, so today's article is Are low carb and high fat diets suitable for athletes? Big question. Hopefully we can get to at least, not an answer, but at least information to be able to make an informed decision on it. Be able to help us decide if it's something that we want to try or to kind of put to our strategies. And it's brought to us by Performance Endurance Sports Nutrition, really great site. I'll send you the link here at the bottom, and I'll link it here at the end of the stream as well. So thanks to them for that. Go ahead and move forward. Just a short, quick overview of what we're looking at. So again, our low carb, high fat diet suitable for athletes. It's brought to us by coach and sports dietitian Alan Patterson. She's a guest blogger at Performance Sports Endurance and Fitness. So what we're going to look at is what is an Lchf, essentially low carb, high fat diet. We're going to look at what are the benefits of this diet for athletes. And we're going to look at what are the negatives of this diet for us as athletes. And if there's anything that we don't quite know about it, and what the questions are. And then lastly, we'll kind of wrap it all up and hopefully at least give a couple answers. If there's any questions, obviously, we can address those as well. All right, like everything's shared out, we'll go ahead and get started here. All right, so question goes, what's a low carb, high fat diet? As the name suggests, it's a diet where there's a limitation on carbohydrate sources and is high in fat. We'll talk about kind of what kind of fat and what sort of thing that we're trying to focus on here as we move forward. But the thing to remember is there's not just one single LCHF diet. There's actually a number of them. And a lot of times you'll hear in the media about a very, very low carbohydrate diet. And essentially this is one where you may hear the term, goes by the term ketogenic. It's a big term, but all it says, or all it tells us, is that it's a very, very low carbohydrate restriction and typically used in more medical settings. So just to put it into perspective, you're looking at something like 20 grams of carbohydrate a day. This is used for the strict ketogenic diet, but again, clinical setting, but takes a huge amount of planning and diligence and can be definitely challenging socially. So some other variations, which we can see used by athletes, range anywhere from 100 all the way up to what I've seen to 300 grams of carbohydrates per day, which can be much easier to follow, but still requires a good amount of planning. So with regards to fat, the second part of this, there's also a wide variation. However, it ends up being about 50% of your intake being from a fat source. And this is a healthy fat source. We're looking at plant-based fats such as avocados, olive oil, nuts and seeds. Okay, so kind of that's the catch. More whole foods essentially. So we move on to our next topic. What are the benefits for us as athletes to eating this style of way? So essentially, like I mentioned, it does promote food choices being more whole food sourced. You're looking at potatoes, you're looking at rice for those sources of carbohydrates, starchy vegetables, lots and lots of vegetables, and then healthy fats. A lot of times you find many of us eat too many carbs, carbohydrates throughout a day for the amount of activity that we do. Think about your rest day versus your active day. They should vary in the amount of food intake that you're having, and if it's not, it may be a little bit on the high end. So the good thing about low carbohydrate, high fat way of eating, the meal time is not strictly dictated, where you need to eat at a certain time. Essentially, it's kind of guided by hunger, and that's one thing that a lot of us, I feel, kind of lose out or miss, where we no longer know when we're hungry or when we're not. So I think it's really important to understand that it is one benefit to this way of eating. So the downside is that after training, a lot of times, if you're doing more than one session a day, or even in your one hard session a day, your appetite can be suppressed. After a workout, can kind of move things around. So again, some of the benefits, more of a whole food approach, taking a hard look at how many actual carbohydrates you're putting in and out per day, and then looking at meal timing. Let's talk about some of the negatives, some of the hard negatives as far as for athletes. So not all sunshine. So as far as kind of benefits, so before we jump onto this, this wagon, you've heard the benefits of losing weight, of being able to learn to use this fat burning engine, and I think there's a time for that, and so we'll talk about that too. But here are some of the negatives that we found in the science. So we're talking about particularly for athletes though, okay? So we're looking at loss of your top end gear, particularly the ability to pick up pace at high intensity. So you're looking at work above zone 3 being typically difficult to train. So you could right away see there's a time and a place for this type and way of eating. But if you are doing kind of the things that we're doing, for example, in the endurance lab, or you're in a build phase, or a specialty phase where you're building to an event, you'll find that the high-end, high-intensity may be very, very difficult. So training can definitely feel very harder, feeling when you're training with the carbohydrates on board. There's also an initial adaptation period, which can cause unwanted side effects, unexpected side effects, which can be like mood disturbances, irritability, and headaches. This is essentially as you transition from a higher carbohydrate intake per day to a lower amount. Could also be, has been touted, possibly being more expensive, meaning that just the cost of the different foods that you would be picking up. And also if you're not eating a good amount of green vegetables, things like that, it could be low fiber as well. So really important to kind of balance things out as, you know, along with everything else. Get a quick message out to the group. All right, there we go. All right, so with some of the negatives out of the way, we can kind of talk about some of the positives. And some of them is you can go through a time of restricted carbohydrate use. And what that'll allow riders to do is a lot of times scrub off unwanted weight from their body. But you can't do this simultaneously with trying to train in high intensity. And so the time to do this would be early base or off season, but definitely very, very difficult if you're trying to roll during your build periods where you're doing multiple threshold, VO2 max intervals, kind of high level, high zone work, just because that top end is not there. Because, you know, regardless how much we train, that bottom side of that engine, that lower side of that engine, burning those carbohydrates at the top end is still going to be present. So it's still important. So again, a time and place for this, and the time being more off-season / base building periods where efforts are in the longer end of zone 2, meaning long endurance rides and that sort of thing. All right, so are there any questions that we have about this low carb, high fat diet? There's still a lot that we don't know. It's relatively new in the science as well as use in athletes. There's things about what's called the gut microbiome, which is the balance you have of the good and the bad bacteria that you have in your body. The effect that this has on hormones and balance, particularly in females. And then the balance of micronutrients in the body as well. So, and then overall health, since it's been quite new in the science, there's only so much research that's been done up to this point. So what we're looking at is still making sure that it's something that's healthy for everyone. So if you're a serious athlete and you're wanting to push the pace and train and compete at a high intensity, this style can definitely compromise your performance during the later stages of your build period and can limit you on the top end of your gears, high intensity sides of things. However, using this as a strategic period of this low carb training, and really you can get the best of both worlds, meaning using it during the early periods, during the aerobic engine. You could also do it in a cyclical way where you use it when you're on days of recovery. Let's say you've got 2 days of riding on, you eat carbohydrates in a normal manner, cycle off on the days that you're recovering, cycle back on the days that you're riding. So, but definitely has to be done strategically and not to wing it. So with this knowledge, there's still a lot of questions about the long-term effects, but definitely something that more and more riders that do longer aerobic events, especially cycling, which is in the up above 90% aerobic, whether or not we like to believe it, it is. So definitely very important to take a look at. So a little bit short of our topic today. I'll quickly go over what we covered. So essentially, we covered what a low carbohydrate, high fat diet was, and that there wasn't a single version of it, and then and that there's two types. Two main types are ones where it's highly restricted, typically found to be used in the clinical settings of 20 grams per day or less, and then other variations vary anywhere from 100 to what I've seen to 300 grams a day for athletes. And that is a big comparison to the ones that a normal carbohydrate day of a, let's say, typical American, which could be easily into the thousands. The importance of healthy fats and the benefits of a transition to whole foods, and the ability to kind of look at our current diet and how many carbohydrates we're currently eating. Some of the negatives about the loss of top gear, meaning during high intensity, and how training can feel harder. And then, some of the things as far as that we don't know, some questions about the diet and its long-term effects, and kind of how to strategically put everything together during your base periods. All right, so pretty good talk. Let me take a look at our channels here. Kevin Stevens says, "Clearly you mean a loaf of bread." Now, unfortunately, Kevin, that's in response to the ketogenic diet. It's actually one slice of bread. That's one gel, one slice of bread. So pretty low. And that means no other carbohydrates that day except for green leafy vegetables and healthy fats. Let's roll down. I did see some messages here from Taya. She's got a lot of information on this as well. So let me roll down. Good morning. All right. Ian's on board too. Good morning, Ian. Good morning, Taya. Good morning, Nadia. So on the recovery day after a hard one, for example. Yeah, Taya. So from what I've kind of looked into or kind of read or also used. So for example, if you were day of, we're finishing a workout at 6 a.m. here, you're looking at the post-workout window. I would say I would open my window this morning. I would eat full carbohydrate, full normal meals all throughout today. And then let's say I was off tomorrow, which would be Saturday. You could apply on the day off. So on the day of, I would say could be beneficial, and you could see yourself cycling off. So let's say we did 2 days on. I did Thursday and Friday workouts, eat at a normal cycle, and then Saturday, which would be a day off, you could cycle off, let's say, for 2 days or that 1 day off, and then cycle back on Sunday if you were to come back. So definitely seen some riders do it that way. It really depends. So what happens is when riders are back to back, like we are, 4, 5, 6 days a week doing something, you definitely find yourself kind of in a bind. And that's one thing that we always recommend or always remind our riders, that you can only do one thing well at a time, right? If you're wanting to build your FTP, you build your FTP, and you fuel for that. You fuel for the high intensity. You fuel for your ability to get the power up and get your engine going. And so, and then if you're on the off season where you're just getting on, putting a whole lot of miles in, threshold or below, there's not a whole lot of high intensity that you're doing. That's the time to do it. So very tricky as you bring it up to do on recovery days versus non-recovery days or workout days. Really good point. So this is a really big topic for a lot of people, and there's people who stand on both sides of the fence as far as, could they do this all the time? I've personally done it both ways, both in base and trying to do it within, and it is really difficult. So fueling on majority of protein, and limiting those carbohydrates, and definitely, you'll see the changes in your body as far as decreasing fat, muscle definition, and weight, of course. But a lot of times it makes the workouts a lot more difficult. I've gotten down below 100 grams kind of weighted per day, and it's difficult with the intensity that we do. So a lot of times, just as experiments, depending on what part of the season that we're in, it's definitely worth a look at. But as a lot of us are getting ready for our final 8-week push to Worlds in November, I wouldn't recommend starting it now, but I did want to bring it up because there's been a lot of conversation about it, and a lot of times it just becomes a confusion on what to work on. And so one thing to remember, and you'll hear it again from endurance lab coaches too, that there's just one thing we could work on. If you're looking to race fast, you have to sacrifice those other things and kind of put that at the top of the pyramid. And then at that point, everything else trickles down. During the off season, we'll switch off. You'll go to more social rides, hopefully, and we're going to really encourage a lot of our riders this year to do that. So we're not getting burnout at the beginning of the year in January when things are just getting tired of doing. So, all right, I'm open for any questions. Yeah, thanks. Hope that did make sense. Let me kind of cruise around, make sure there's nothing else. So far, so good. Looks good. All right. So if you do have any added questions, definitely let me know. Post here. I will post the. Oh, was there anything there? All right. So you can head to performance.com/nutrition tips. They've got some really good information there. So definitely check them out there at performance.com. I'll post the link there. Any comments, I'll post up. So thanks for joining us today. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next week in the feed zone.